Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today's video is part 2 of our video series on semantics. I don't know if this will be the last part because I still want to talk about semantic shift, but today is part 2. We will be talking about some competing theories related to semantics and word meaning. We haven't really gotten into compositional semantics, which is about the meanings of words and phrases. I'm not really sure that we will because it gets very complicated very quickly. And I'm really not the best at it, but today we'll be continuing to talk about lexical semantics and theories behind word meaning. So, let's get straight to it. So, there are two main competing approaches to word meaning. One is called componential analysis, which says that the meaning of a word is reducible to a binary set of features. And one is prototype theory, which says that the meaning of a word is fuzzy based on exemplars and similarities. And the purpose of today's video is to convince you that prototype theory better accounts for what people do in real life. If you are a big fan of componential analysis, stop watching now. So, in the last video, we talked about hyponymy, or hyponyms and hypernyms, as one kind of semantic relationship in which X is a kind of Y, so penguins are a kind of bird, birds are a kind of animal, etc., etc. And we'll see that when we establish hyponymic relationships, we are also attributing class features to members of that class. So heifers and bulls are kinds of cows, which is a kind of animal. Ewes and rams are kinds of sheep, etc., etc. We can classify dogs by gender if we want to, but I'll get demonetized, so I won't. But we are attributing class features to members of that class. So, componential analysis argues that all word meanings can be broken down into a set of binary features. So if we say that animalness is a feature of the words heifer, bull, calf, and sow, we can represent it with something like this, where we have animal, human, male, female, bovine, ovine, child as different kinds of binary features. So we say that bull and calf and sow and ram are positive for animalness and negative for humanness. Some of these features are positive or negative for male or female. Maybe they're positive or negative for bovine or ovine, meaning they're in the cow family or the pig family, or the sheep family, I mean. And they can also be positive or negative for something like adulthood. We could go farther and farther down this list of they're positive or negative for hooves. They're positive or negative for being a cow, essentially. But we can differentiate the members of this class by specifying how they differ. Now, this works for some kinds of words. We can say yes, a heifer and a bull have all the same features in common, except that one is male and one is female, and that's where they differ. However, when we get down to more complex phrases, we see this start to fall apart. For example, if I tell you, what are the features of breakfast versus dinner? You might say both are positive for meal and negative for snack. They are both, but one is positive for night and one is positive for morning. And that's really where they differ. However, what if I say, let's have breakfast for dinner? That's a phrase I could say. What if I have breakfast at midnight? What if I have a late breakfast that starts in the afternoon? What if I have pizza for breakfast? We might say that breakfast is defined by a certain category of foods or a certain kind of, a certain time of day. But we'll see that things are typically much more nuanced than that. Where we can think of an exemplar breakfast, which is probably pancakes eaten at 9 in the morning or 7 in the morning if you're an earlier riser than I am. But something like pizza for breakfast or breakfast for dinner or breakfast at midnight are all perfectly acceptable phrases that really are difficult to put into the componential analysis theory. So instead, let's imagine that you're taking a survey. Let's say that you have been contacted by the authors of a beginner's textbook for elementary school learners of English as a second language. Many vocabulary words in the book need to be illustrated by pictures. Each word can have only one picture. For each word, write down an example that you would use to illustrate it. For example, if given the word vegetable, you might select a picture of a carrot. You got it? Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions. Now, which of these would you select to represent the word ball? A, B, C, or D? You can put your answer in the comments, or you can just remember it yourself. The word you're representing is ball. Do you represent it with A, B, C, or D? Okay. What about the word bird again? A, B, C, or D? Now let's look at the word fruit. We have A, B, C, or D. And yes, technically, B is a fruit. It is the fruiting body of a tree. So once again, if asked to select one of these fruits as an example for a book for elementary schoolers learning English, would you select A, B, C, or D? Okay. And last one. What about furniture? Again, A, B, C, or D? Now, if componential analysis is correct, we would expect to see answers that look something like this. A perfectly even split between all answers. Because of course, all of these things are balls. A basketball, a soccer ball, a baseball, and a football are all balls. if the componential analysis were true, we would expect to see a pretty close to equal distribution amongst all of these different representations. However, I expect that more of you probably answered soccer ball over football, or maybe basketball over football. And this is definitely true for something like fruit. I bet that most of you picked D, or maybe some of you picked A, but I bet that many of you picked D as your representation of this word. Now, why would that be true? If it is the case that all 4 of these are examples of fruits, this is where we get prototype theory, which sees meanings as being related to cognitive categorization. So categories have members which are more central or prototypical, and these are the best representations of that category. So mental images associated with concepts may be closely connected to their prototypical examples. Remember, in our last video we talked about sense and referent, and if I say the word bird, you have a mental representation of that word, and it is likely closer to a sparrow than an ostrich. Categories may have members which are less central, even peripheral. You may think of a robin as the prototypical bird, and an ostrich is somewhere more on the periphery. So we could represent that with something like this, where we have our exemplar, prototypical bird, and different kinds of birds get further and further away from this prototype. They're still part of the category, however, they are not the first thing that comes to mind when we conjure a mental image of something within that category. Now, not all categories have clear boundaries. If I was to tell you which of these are the prototypical red or green or blue, you might be able to do that. But if I said, what is the prototypical color, that might be more difficult. Some of you might say red, some might say blue, but probably very few of you would say fuchsia or lime green or sky blue as your prototypical color. You'd likely choose from a smaller subset of your possible options. There is more evidence for prototype theory, so things like psychology experiments show that there is faster reaction time for identifying central members, slower for more peripheral. So if I asked you to identify pictures of birds, you would likely react faster when presented with a picture of a robin or a sparrow compared to a picture of an emu or an ostrich. Things like naming tasks and survey results also show evidence for prototype theory. There's also linguistic evidence. There is a high frequency of central members when looking at word frequency, or the number of words within a category, and peripheral members are more marked, so people may use hedges, qualifiers, etc. when describing them. For example, an ostrich is not just a bird, it is a flightless bird. We don't refer to other kinds of birds as flighted birds. We don't say there are flighted and non-flighted birds or flightless birds, but we do take the time to use that qualifier when talking about a kind of bird that is more on the periphery and farther away from the prototype. So, that is the argument for prototype theory as one of the leading theories when it comes to categorizing word meanings. I hope this video convinced you, but if it didn't or you have more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. This was a shorter video, but I'll be back with more linguistic related videos very soon. If you have particular topics you'd like to see, please let me know. And for now, good night. Good night. Good night.